All right. To... All right, we are being live streamed.
Okay, I'm gonna hit this button that says "I got it" because I got it.
Got it.
Mary says we're going live. We're going live. Anyway, another day of freezing, by the way. A cold day here.
Hopefully that'll be like the last day of freezing.
People's Republic of Massachusetts. Oh, there we are. There we are. There we are. Okay. I see us. We're on the TV.
Jeez. People are probably coming on right now.
Who the hell friggin' knows? But it's okay. I'm gonna sit here and just be cold. Maybe one of those cold. I think I'm gonna bitch today. I think I'm gonna whine today.
Wow, shocker.
I don't care. It's all good. It's 70 degrees pretty soon. It doesn't really matter. So anyway, so how are you? What's happening? What's the word?
Good. How are you?
Good. Oh
yeah.
God.
Hey, good morning, Caleb.
Hey.
Good morning, Ski. Morning, Barbara.
Look, there are people.
Yep.
Yeah.
There are.
That's good. Anyway, so what's going on with you?
Morning, Rob. Morning, Lisa.
You seem to be in a relatively good mood this morning.
I am.
Yeah, making sure, because you never know.
Oh God. Never.
That's all good. So good morning to everybody. Good morning to everybody. Wake up a little bit. I gotta wake up today. I've got to wake up.
We've been up since like 7 o'clock.
I've been up since like 6:30.
I know. Well, my defense, I've had to been feeling the greatest the last few days. Stupid allergies are hickled. Good morning, Bill. Good morning, Mike. Yeah, our friend Bill is on here. He just got a really cool tattoo of the Seminary Ridge.
Hey, Bill. Yeah, he did. He's the tattooed man all of a sudden. He's like that Ray Bradbury story. No, it's pretty cool. He's got a couple of good ones. He was showing of course, all the cool people have tattoos, man. I don't know if you know this.
I do.
Oh God, well, yeah, everybody knows. Everybody knows. But that's cool.
I don't see my tattoo.
Okay, everybody's seeing your tattoo.
Morning, Jim. Both Jims are on here. Jim Samia and Jim Miller.
Oh God, the truth hurts. Yeah. On Saturday morning. No, so that's cool. So how's everything going?
Good. I thought we had a really good episode about Robert Smalls, and really fun last weekend in Gettysburg, hanging out with people at Fourscore at the gathering that we had there. And
that was a good time. And some of the people who were on this, Sammy is obviously some other folks were on there.
Yeah, Ski was there too.
Or I was gonna say Ski.
Yeah.
Still, no, that was a good time. It was good to hang out. It's good to, the Civil War community is a good group because for the most part, beer drinkers, people are cool. Despite some of the social media stuff, I think in real life people, I've yet to meet anybody in person. Who isn't really cool, and so that we had a good time. We had a fun time with old Jacob and old John Gentili. We had a good time with them. So
that was cool.
A lot of the folks on here were pretty cool. So anyways, so that was fun doing that episode. That was a good time. I mean, the story of Smalls is one. I think a lot of people know his story, but I think what people. The story seems to end when the planter gets to safety for a lot of the small stuff. At least that's the stuff you see online. If you see go on YouTube or you see some of the lectures. Yeah. But the thing about him though is he's a guy who could easily have because he was a hero and he was getting requests regularly to speak. And Samuel DuPont, the Navy guy, let him go on some of these speaking engagements, but Smalls said, I don't want to leave. I want to keep piloting the planter. I want to stay part of this. He could have gone up to Boston and New York City or any of these places, lived in safety, and made a ton just on the speaking tour, the Rubber Chicken tour. But he was a guy who wanted to continue to be part of the process, and his life was in danger. He was enemy number one. He's like me at Yankee Stadium. That's how it was. But he kept doing it, and he always wanted to sail as a freeman into Charleston.
Yeah.
And you want to talk about a bucket list. I mean, seriously.
He's there when the flag is taken down after Fort Sumter's fired upon, and they have that whole thing. But then, he's there for the raising of it again, too, in 1865, which I thought was pretty cool. He's one of these people that he's literally there at the very beginning and there at the very end of the Civil War.
No, and he's somebody who obviously, his story is such that he was born into slavery. His mother was kind of, took the McKee family Joan and Margaret McKee, the parents of Henry McKee, took a shine to her when she was about 11 years old and made her kind of a house servant. And so she kind of escaped that plantation life. But then, when handful of years later, when Robert's born, he's growing up in that environment over there on 511 Prince Street.
Yeah.
And so he grew up with that fear of having his family separated, because that's what happened to his mother.
Yeah.
Now, admittedly, Lydia's family stayed in Ashford.
Yeah.
I couldn't find any record of them being shipped off anywhere. And she would get to visit them. She would ride in regularly. So she did get to see them.
Mm-hmm.
But you can imagine, if you think about it, think of a little kid, like when your mother used to ditch you in the supermarket back there in Goderich back in the day, that fear you had.
I would just wander off.
Well, of course you would. But that fear of being separated from your family is a real one. And anybody who has a child, who has a kid, just imagine living with the daily fear of coming home and finding your child or your parents gone.
Yeah. Just and gone. Like that someone can just come and be like, oh, I like this child. I'm going to take them with me. And just like you're taken away from your family and nothing is really thought of it. Elsie said that he loves at the school. There's a school named after him, and apparently the mascot is the Generals.
Yes, Generals. Yeah, that's pretty cool. Hey, what's going on? Hey, Dave Pelland, what's going on, man?
And then Darren is on here from across the pond. So is MJ's on here too. Morning, MJ.
Yankee Stadium is welcoming to all. You know something, Dave? I'm going to agree with you on that, because a younger and more vulnerable Darren back in the day wore a Yankee suck T-shirt to Yankee Stadium, and no one gave me shit. So do you want to talk about Robert Small's balls, Dave? Yeah, that's what I did. It worked out fine. I'm here to tell the story. So,
John Gentile's on here. He said, "Great episode. Thank you so much." He learned a lot. Didn't know his story. I think that's the thing. Like, I found both of us had different biographies about Robert Smalls, which they all, like, pretty much the same thing. And the one thing is, like, the one quote that I had is like, history can play strange tricks. And there was a person, I think his name was Crowley, that said, Robert Smalls, I don't know why he's not more well known. Hopefully in the next century he will be. And he's still not. It's 2023 and we still don't talk much about him. We know a lot about Harriet Tubman, which is awesome, and Frederick Douglass. But Robert Smalls is somebody that I think deserves to have they all deserve to have their stories told. Good morning, Janet.
Hey, how are you? John Gentile. We should have had an Australian translation for him on this episode.
Oh God.
for those who know, but that's pretty cool. But for real though, he's. You want to talk about a guy, and this is speaking of Smalls now, not Gentile, about about having this plan, and a lot of things fell for him just right. But at the same time, he had a lot of obstacles to get through. He was very lucky that Charles Relia, the captain of the Planter, that he went home with both Samuel Hancock and Samuel Pitcher, the engineer and the first mate, would leave the boat which was against the law at the time, General Order Number 5 in Charleston, that you had to stay on the boat. And
then he comes back and he's all, dude, where's my boat?
But I have homework to do. You could do it on the boat. Sure. No, never mind. It'd be cool if you knew that one.
I don't.
Anyways, anybody with a good 80s movie reference will call that one. Anyway, so he was able to take that, and because he was trained by John Ferguson, the boat owner, he knew how to ride it. And because he had experience of knowing those signals to get through the forts, especially Fort Sumter, everything worked out for him. And but all I can think about, when I think about the Robert Smalls story, this part of the story where he's escaping is when it's 4:15 in the morning, May 13th, 1862, and the fog is rolling in. It's that early dawn, darkness, gray, whatever the hell you want to call it, the gray of the morning. And you see the fort on the horizon, and you know that the next 10 minutes that's going to happen is going to dictate literally life or death. What goes through your mind at that situation?
I would be so I can't imagine. I'm picturing it like a scene in a movie, but I can't even imagine like what that would have been like. Elsie wants to know, do we know exactly where in the harbor the Planter left from? And then Jim mentions that William Still is another Black man who people should know more about. And I think Jim just read a book about him too.
Elsie, I did it years ago, few years ago. I did a Fort Sumter tour. And if you've been to Fort Sumter, there is there's like a visitor center where you pick up the boat to go in. The tour guide said that it was somewhere in that area where the Planter took off from. He didn't know where exactly it was, but it would have been on that dock area, pretty close to where the visitor center is on the Fort Sumter National Site. That's what they had said at the tour. So I have no reason to doubt them, but that's a good question. But that's what they said when I did the tour there. So it would have been somewhere where if you go to the visitor center, if you've been there, it would have been likely right in that area where you would have launched from.
Yeah.
So there
I'd love to go do that tour. I've only been to like I said, when I was in Charleston, I've got to be like 10 years ago now. I toured Fort Moultrie, which was really cool. Didn't go out to Sumter because it just I don't know, we didn't have time, or I was with non-Civil War.
You go to Charleston, don't go to Fort Sumter.
That's just the way it worked out.
That's good times. Good times.
My tour guide, she's a wonderful person. She was just she tolerated the history for so long. She knew her stuff though. She took us all around, and I got to see she took us down the place where the slave auctions were, and that was I was like, oh god,
that's right. That is in pissing distance from the Daughters of the American Confederate Daughters of the Confederacy.
I know what you're talking about.
And so that area is Charleston is first of all, anybody who hasn't been in Charleston, I would highly suggest
it's a beautiful city. I mean, and I do want to get there, obviously, to go to Fort Sumter, but I loved being at Fort Moultrie because there had been so many Civil War generals that were stationed there. Like Sherman was there, Reynolds was there. Trying to think, wasn't Poe that?
Edgar Allan Poe.
Poe was there too.
He was a sergeant major at Fort Moultrie.
Yeah, but just the fact I remember being there and thinking, oh my god,
when he left, he came back nevermore.
Wow.
See what happens? That's a high level con. But for real, but Charleston's great because to this day it has a city ordinance where the tallest building in the city has to be a church. Mm-hmm. So there are no skyscrapers. So if you're coming from Mount Pleasant and you go over the Ravenel Bridge and you see the skyline, it looks like those 1930s pictures from Boston or New York City with these small buildings and all you see is church steeples. And it's beautiful. It's got a great cobblestone area down by where the battery is, where the old antebellum houses are. Yeah. Where the guns are, fired from on Sumter. It's a beautiful. It's one of my favorite towns. It's a great place to go. And they really embrace their history. You go see the Hunley, which is just north of the.
I so want to go see that. Jim's doing some Civil War book enabling. Vigilance, The Life of William Sill, Father of the Underground Railroad by Andrew K. Dimer. And so there's some Civil War book enabling. Dave mentions Charleston's Austin visit, love the carriage tour. Yeah, I like I said, I still want to get back there because there's so much history there. And wasn't it the one good morning, Ryan. He said good afternoon. Got another one of our across the pond guys on here.
And another thing for you might like, I heard, I don't know if this is true or not, but there's some pretty good breweries on King Street by College of Charleston I may or may not have stumbled into. Wow. And what's good about too is a lot of the bars in that town are rooftop bars. So you can go up there and just over. Yeah, Charleston is definitely, if you haven't been, you really should go. It's whether you like history or not.
It's such a beautiful city.
So you can go for the history, but if you have a girlfriend, boyfriend, spouse, whatever, who doesn't like history, that person's going to still enjoy it. It's one of the few places you can really go that's fun for everybody. Yeah. But if you go, okay, you absolutely have to take the early boat to Fort Sumter. It's 7 a.m. because if you go that early, you get to see them raise the American flag at Fort Sumter, which is an awesome thing to see. Just saying.
Mike mentions, and I know you and I have heard this too, that Charleston's very haunted. And then Tony mentions that Beaufort, or I don't know, we were kind of knocked for how we pronounced it by someone. It's a great place to go. The mass 54th graves are there, and almost all the old plantation houses are intact.
Yeah, it's that whole area is really, really cool. If you have a boat, you can get out to Battery Wagner. You can see that, but you can't access it anymore. Morris Island, James Island, a lot of those places. Sullivan's Island is great. There's actually a really good Boston sports bar at Sullivan's Island. It's all Red Sox and Patriots stuff. So
apparently there's an Edgar Allan Poe tavern there too.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of it. A lot of it's embraced. It really, really is. They're cool with the history. Some of my favorite Civil War conversations took place at the West End Brewery. Which, speaking of haunted, Mary, That's a brewery that's really creepy. That there's a lot of good ghost stories.
There's got a lot of backstory to that, I think. We were talking ghost stories with some people last weekend, and I mean, like, I think my whole take on them is that they are a great addition to history as long as they're done well. And there are some that it's like any history. If it's not done well, then it's not going to be that great. But you learn so much, like just history of the area that you wouldn't necessarily learn on a battlefield tour at all, right? Because that's focused on the battle, whereas like something, I don't know, you're on a Gettysburg ghost tour, you're going to learn more about the people in the town, and that and then you realize, like, holy shit, these ghost stories were here when the battle was happening. And Civil War soldiers, the ghost thing didn't happen after the Civil War. Ghost stories have been told for centuries. So that's, I really don't like it when people say, like, it takes away from the history of the battle. It's like, no, it doesn't. If it's done properly, it actually adds to it, and you can sometimes pique people's interest. I have a very good friend, and that's how they got into the Civil War, was through hearing a ghost story, and they are like hardcore into the history now. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, no question.
Someone, C. Jordan mentions definitely visit the Hunley and then the Battle of Secessionville.
Yeah, Secessionville. Talk about an aptly named town, by the way. You know who should have been born there was States' Rights Gist. Imagine that.
States' Rights. God.
That's where he should have been born. I'm just saying. Secessionville is cool. I mean, that was the site when Smalls was fired upon, and he ended up taking the boat over because the captain was chicken, and he hit under the bottom deck, and Smalls had to save the day, and that's what got him to be the first captain of a U.S. vessel in American history for a black guy, because of his actions at Secessionville. So that whole area is really, really neat. First of all, it's very pretty, but just the you talk to some interesting people there too. I mean, there are some people there who legitimately have relatives who were there, who talk the stories of the fear of Sherman, the fear of, and there's a lot of stuff. And sometimes some of the things they say don't really jive with real history, but at the same time, it's what they were told.
It's what they felt at the time.
Those are great stories too. You don't sit there and say, well, actually, but that's how it was. I mean, Mary Chestnut's diary, the whole book is that. I
can't imagine how they felt in Charleston. Who was it who took Charleston? It wasn't
it was Schimmelfennig.
Yeah, Pigman.
I mean, admittedly, that's like, that's like finding $20 in your pocket. I mean, when Sherman showed up after Savannah, they, the town evacuated. And so he literally walked in and took the town over. But yeah, that's a Gettysburg connection for him, which was Schimmelfennig was the guy who took over Charleston. And the first troops who went into it initially were USCT guys.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. It's when you start to dig into the history, it's very interesting. And like the thing I found is like all the connections that Smalls has to other stuff that we talked about, like the blockade, which we talked about with Alexander Rose. We had a really great book club meeting with him the other night too, which was really cool. And then the whole, it ties into the March to the Sea and what was happening with that, as well as like the one thing that I really realized, and you emphasized this in the episode, is just how bad of an event Ebenezer Creek was. How far-reaching effects.
I think, we said this in the episode, what people need to realize is, look, we have our fun with Sherman, with the memes and the fire in Atlanta. He was not a good dude. No. He wasn't. And truth be told, if you're talking about a top 10 bad racist in the Civil War, he's up there.
He is.
Right? I mean, this is a guy literally that, Rufus Saxton, the military governor who's covering Beaufort, would not let Sherman's men in because how bad they treated the black freedmen or the ex-slaves. And so you need to understand, if you're studying these people, you got to look at both sides of the coin. And Sherman was a hardcore racist. He was, and you don't hide from it. You call it what it is. I mean, I like Sherman because I felt what he did helped expedite the end of the war. But he was somebody you're not going to invite over for dinner, which is ironic because who did was Howard in Maine.
Yep,
invited him over, and we had this debate this morning or yesterday morning. Days all blended after a while talking to him. But I have to think Howard hated Sherman.
I think he struggled.
I have to. I think because he was and so the fact that he had Sherman up there with guys like John Robb Gordon to Brunswick, it's just a fascinating. And it's just one of those things. But I think you have to look at the big picture when you look at these people. And you know, a lot of the stuff that was said about William Sherman, you know, it's a lot of it's true. And if you're a Northerner, you have to look at that too. You just have to. You have to look at the ugly side of everything.
Yeah.
You can't sit here and say Gordon was a racist and he was this and that, and then sit there and say Sherman is the second coming. You just have to be fair. You have to be
exactly. Fair. Yeah, that's the one thing you and I were talking about this morning is that aspect of it. And it is a very dark aspect of it. And but it is the reality of the time that we are dealing with people that are racist in the North. No, they all aren't, you know, but like, I have to think that Howard struggled with things like Ebenezer Creek, because he is a guy that, and he's ahead of his time in this way. Howard was a person that was for racial equality, but he had to keep that quiet. He started to become more outspoken about it near the end of his life. Sherman didn't like that aspect of him. He did not like that somebody as high up as Howard was in the Army was that outspoken about it. The other thing too that Howard got himself into some trouble for is he was at a dinner in
you have to slow down with the Howards. I can only drink so much. I can only do so many sips with
anyway,
Howard.
This is
I'm like David Hasselhoff here if you keep this up. Anyway.
So he was at a dinner in the 1880s, and I guess the issue of the women's suffrage came up, and Howard said, it is going to happen someday, and you know what? I would support it, which again, not a great viewpoint to have, sadly, at the time. And that's the thing is he could be very outspoken, and he was also very much, and this is what the author Carpenter wrote in his, I think, the biographies in the 1960s, that one of Howard's faults was the fact that he did think he was very righteous. And you know, he did not like to talk about Chancellorsville because it was a mistake he made. And Howard knew that it was a mistake that he made, and maybe he should have listened to von Gilsa a little bit more. And yeah, like Dave says, racism sadly was national. It was.
Well, to go into Smalls again, you know, there was that 7-month period when he had to sail the Planter up to Philly to get fixed. I mean, 7 months, it must have been paid by the hour to fix that damn boat. But he was up there. While he was there, he gave speeches. And that there are those stories, you know, where he was a hero in Philadelphia, and he was riding on a train.
Yeah.
And everyone knew who he was. And they said, oh, you're Robert Smalls, you're a national hero, but you're black, you can't ride on this train. This is in Philly. Yeah. And so he had to deal with racism everywhere. You know, I'm sure he was very happy with that Super Bowl result, by the way, after that story. Just saying.
He probably was. There's a question here from Barbara. She's wondering if you know about a quote from Mary Chestnut about devouring their clothes. Any info on that?
I know vaguely the story she's talking about. You know, it's vague because you don't know if she's talking about eating the clothes or burning the clothes. And it's just one of those things. I think it's just a one throwaway line. She tended to embellish a little bit. And she tend to over dramatize stuff. So beyond that, it's anybody's speculation. It's one of those interpretive quotes you can take it.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, she definitely was a little bit of a drama queen, I think, but her story, she's a great resource. I mean, a lot of it turns out not to be she's trying to kind of thought of it as conjecture. She doesn't know exactly what's going on, but yeah, to see her fear towards Sherman, they didn't know what he was going to do and all this other stuff. And she does have some writings about how the African Americans were reacting to Sumter as well at the time it happened. And that whole thing, Charleston was they had to really start, they had to instill all these rules and stuff. It was not a good place for them to live at all.
No, Charleston was tough. And then once DuPont and Thomas Sherman, once they took over Port Royal, and you had 12,000 men, and you had the combined Navy, Army, basically the Marines, just about 60 miles away. There was that fear that Charleston was going to fall into martial law, and so that made things even tighter in the town. And one of the cool things we said in the episode, which I always found as a fascinating story, Smalls was a 5-time representative from the Beaufort area in South Carolina in the 1870s, right around there. And one of the things he really wanted was to make sure that landing spot at Port Royal, where DuPont and Sherman landed and held their base during that period, maintained as a military-owned installation going forward. And he was able to pull that off. And that land today is Parris Island, where the Marines train.
Yeah.
And so, like we said in the episode, if you're a U.S. Marine and you train there, that land exists specifically because of Robert Smalls.
Yeah.
So his fingerprints are all over this, way beyond that planter story. It's just, there's so many cool things about him that I think if people really get into him and you study him, and there's a lot of good books about Robert Smalls, and I guess there's a movie Ronnie from AG had mentioned. There's a movie coming out.
Yeah, which is really cool. Tony wonders, was it John Simmons that started teaching Smalls the boating skills?
That was the story.
Yeah.
So Simmons was a big dude, and he took a shine to Smalls. He taught him how to tie ropes. He taught him how to tie knots, and he taught him how to drive I don't know if the phrase drive a schooner, where the hell the thing is, sail it, I guess it would
pilot.
Be. Pilot. Yeah, I guess so. But John Simmons taught him how to sail. Smalls always had a fascination with water growing up in those rivers around Beaufort, Port Royal, but Simmons taught him. And then once he got those jobs on the docks, and then when he got the job through John Ferguson on the planter, he knew how to ride it. But it was John Simmons who taught him how to sail. And so he's somebody who you think about just how the personality Smalls had, where he was so affable and so friendly and so eloquent and so smart, that people took such a shine to him that they were able to, able to learn, and he was very smart. And so he was somebody who was counted on. So, but it's such a cool story when you think about it. So Simmons was the guy who, long answer a quick question. Yeah, he was the guy who taught him how to sail. It's
a really cool story. Andrew Hickman says Smalls is a fascinating individual. Like he is, and he's not that well known. Like we said in the episode, not that well known at all, which is kind of sad.
Well, I think he's more well known than you think he is. I think the thing about Smalls, and we said this in the episode, if you're gonna take a trinity of African American Civil War people, you have Harry Tubman, Frederick Douglass, and Robert Smalls. Now there are many other people. Just saying, but in my opinion, Smalls should be up there with the rest of them. And it's not just because of his escape; it's what he did during the war and after the war.
Yeah.
And he was, and the fact that he, just like Tubman, everything he did, he knew if he was caught, he was dead.
Yeah,
he was. And so guys like Wendell Phillips up here in Boston called him the hero of Charleston, and speeches over here at the Tremont Temple up the street here.
Yeah.
And he was somebody who was really embraced by the abolitionist community.
Yeah.
Because his balls were steel. They were. I mean, he's the guy you want in the big moments. And when they were sailing towards Fort Sumter, and all those men were with them, and their knees were knocking, he was cool as a cucumber and just was able to pull that off, knowing that one mistake, he's dead.
Yeah,
he's dead.
That's the crazy thing. It's like but it was like, for him, it was about the freedom, and not just freedom for him, but freedom for his family and the people he knew as well. Right, like that was the important thing, and that was the one thing we talked about in the episode, is that I think that really hit him when he had kids, right? And he was like, holy shit, there's a chance that my kid could be taken away from me,
Yeah, he's just he was somebody who he had that family values instilled in him from his mother Lydia, but when she was separated, and he grew up with that fear. And when she took him, when he was probably around 9 or 10 or so, to see the slave auction. And to see the whippings at the jail in Beaufort, and to realize this could happen to you. This is the reality we all live in.
Yeah,
you're a house. Your job is shining shoes and fetching water, but this is the reality. And I was separated from my family. This could happen to you.
Yeah,
and that's a fear that certain things happen when you're young that stick with you.
Yeah.
And this is the thing that stuck with him. So going forward, he had that real strong family value. And so he started to have his own, when he had Elizabeth and Robert Jr., when he got married to Hannah, he knew that tomorrow was promised to nobody.
Yeah.
When he came to this, their marriage was not legal. He had to pay $5 a month rent, to Hannah's owner. And so in the whole, he could have basically bought them for $800.
Yeah.
Which didn't buy their freedom, but he kind of helped control them. But there was no way he was going to say that. So he was somebody who needed to protect his family. And when he met with Hannah, and Hannah had that quote, she says, "What happens if we get caught?" And he says, "I'm dead if we get caught."
Yeah. What happens if we, but freedom was worth it.
And her quote back to him was, "If you die, I die too. Let's go for it.
Yeah.
We have to for the kids. We have to be free." And I don't think you realize the powerful moments, these conversations that these people must have had with each other, because it's just we live in a different era, thank goodness, I guess. But these poor people, and dealing with the stuff they had to deal with, and it's just unfathomable to think about the cool under pressure that this guy had, because I mean, it takes a special breed to do what he did, and I think that's why
Is Caleb mentions that he taught his history class about Robert Smalls, and he said it went really well, so that's pretty cool.
Cool.
So he's an episode in research helped him with it, so that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, there are books out there for Smalls.
The one I got it from the university library where I go to school, and it's just called From Slavery to Public Service, Robert Smalls, and it's written by trouble finding the author. Imagine that.
No, shocker. No, but I think Lydia, who she was older. I mean, she was she was an older. There was an age gap between when the stories is Henry McKee was his Robert's father, and no one knows. But who the hell knows? but she wanted to show them the difference in life. John Wilkes Booth, Mary. He talks a lot. In Asia Booth's diary about how the slave life that he saw was much different in Bel Air, Maryland, than in the Deep South, and it was a different level. It was all slavery. It was no good or bad, or better.
Yeah, it's not good anyway.
Robert saw the realities of it, and especially when we went to Charleston, he talked about there was a naked black man and black woman being sold in public out in the street, and there was so many people clogging the streets to see this that they had to stop traffic and close the roads for these poor people. And these things stick with you. And especially when you have such family values, and then you meet Hannah and you want to marry her, you have a family of your own, that fear of losing them puts your life becomes irrelevant. And that's how he was.
Oh, it's such a great story. And it just talking about the whole family aspect of it brings me back to Ebenezer Creek again. And then there was when that happened, I have to find the full quote, but Howard has a quote where he talks about the whole, he remembers the refugees just coming into his camp, after that happened. And it was just that had to stick with some of them on the March to the Sea, just how bad that really was. And the fact that Sherman tries to almost brush it aside is just, it's holy.
Well, Sherman's tunnel vision. It's the same reason why he didn't liberate Andersonville.
Yeah.
And so he's, those 30,000 Andersonville prisoners, and they're all weak and they're, skin and bones. They would be just as much of a hindrance to him as the slaves following him. So he knew he had to get to Savannah because he had to open up that port, because he had to get the supplies in to help begin his Carolinas campaign. He was focused, 1,000 points of light.
Oh, he had to be tunnel visioned. The one thing it's the one thing with the Andersonville, it's I kind of, I'll go back and forth and geez, dude, why couldn't you just done something for them? But I guess, like you said, tunnel vision. But I don't like it when people hit him.
He did send Stolman's cavalry down and check it out. But so he did faint, and people, some of the hardcore Sherman people I know, and I know them, people in my Civil War round table here, big Sherman people, but even they say the racism thing and the fact that he turned his back on those soldiers at Andersonville, those are the two things you can't justify. You just can't.
No.
But again, he knew he had to get to a certain point. Ebenezer Creek was a cramp in his dick that he had to deal with, because that shined a light on a lot of this. And it forced Sherman to hold his nose and meet with those 20 black preachers to come up with that, come up with those how to sustain yourselves. And it led to the 40 acres and a mule, all in South Carolina. That's where it all came from.
Yeah.
But he saw that as a nuisance.
Yeah.
But again, he's a guy who he didn't focus on that he just needed to get where he needed to go to end the war, and that was he was going to focus on. Obviously, he didn't really read the room very much. Okay, he just didn't.
No,
but
I don't know if he was. I don't know if he like didn't care, just like was like whatever. But I mean, Stanton is the one that gets sent down there to basically deal with the PR behind what has happened.
That was a 650 blacks either drowned or caught by Joseph Wheeler's cavalry because they cut those pontoon boats in Ebenezer Creek.
Yeah. Because
he didn't want to feed him anymore. And I hate to say it, but Jefferson C. Davis it's above his pay grade to make that decision. That's not him. Okay.
I mean, personally, Jefferson C. Davis, I don't know why he's even there, because he shot a guy and they're like, that's okay. You can stay in the army.
Bygones.
Yeah.
But for really though, that's what's neat about it is when you look at all that, and it's easy when you study these. What's cool about this is you study these stories, we always look the people up, right? Because that's what the emotion is. And it's easy to put yourself in that situation of what it must have been like, either as a free, a black freed slave or a military person. And just shut your eyes and imagine the reality at that moment of being there when all those refugees come flowing into Port Royal, or how that constant fear of being in Charleston, of being invaded at any moment. And there's so much to it. And there's Battle of Secession Bill. There's the naval assaults that when Smalls commanded that Keokuk boat, and Samuel DuPont got smoked and got fired. But it's neat the way Robert Smalls changed history, though, because when Robert Smalls escaped, when he got out, and he not only got his own ass out, but he got the boat out and he got all those guns out. And he also had the book, the intel that described the defenses around Charleston Harbor. So you lose your playbook the day before the Super Bowl, you lose all those guns. The guy in charge in that area is John C. Pemberton. So he gets his ass fired, and it's because of Robert Smalls escaping.
Pemberton, and Lee is like, "Don't let this happen again." Lee is pissed.
But the fact that John C. Pemberton gets fired because Smalls escapes, because he escapes and gets fired, that's how he ends up in Vicksburg.
Well, we all saw how that worked out for him.
Right, but you see how but
the connections.
He's not in Vicksburg if Smalls doesn't escape.
Exactly.
And it all works together. It all comes together at different points. That's what's so cool about this. Is you study these things and how the connections are made.
Yeah, that's the thing, really we've realized doing these 101 episodes now, this podcast and talking with people and talking on here, that like it's all intertwined. Like one thing has to happen for something else to happen. Andrew was wondering, is the movie about Smalls called Steal Away? I think that's the movie that's being made.
I think that's when Ronnie mentioned it from addressing Gettysburg on the chat the other day.
And then LC asked, I think he means Smalls, wasn't he given a commission as an Army officer because they couldn't give him a true captaincy in the Navy?
See, here's the deal. The Navy was different from the Army. You could not be an enlisted black man in the Army until the Emancipation Proclamation. The Navy was different. The Navy, you could. Not exactly, but you could. There was a big push. See, when he was commanding the Planter, it was owned by a quartermaster. It wasn't part of the military. It was not the Navy, I mean, but it was the Army. So after the Battle of Secession Bill, when he snuck out, there was a big push to get him as a commission in the Navy. But the problem was the Planter was always a transport ship. It wasn't a warship.
Yeah.
So there was a big push for it, but he never left the Planter. He was always going to work that Planter, and it was always a supply ship. So it was a little different. But you had black men serving in the Navy way before Emancipation Proclamation.
Now I'm gonna have that hit song stuck in my head all day.
Which one? Oh, why would you do that? But there was a big push. A lot of people, David Hunter, for example, before he got his ass fired. Speaking of, he was a big proponent of getting him getting him some kind of commission,
Mhm.
but it was different. He wanted to stay on the planter. That's what he wanted.
Yeah, that was his thing. A few people are talking about, like Miranda said, 100 little moments in order for the outcome to happen. So and Dave said that the connections are amazing to stumble across Jason. Hard luck Pemberton strikes again. And yeah, Tony agrees about like what Jeff C. Davis, he kills Bull Nelson, he gets to stay in the army.
Now, that being said, after the war ends, Smalls is going to get a commission in the militia down there.
That's what MJ mentions.
Right. Yeah. But in the war, during the war, he was basically acting as a transporter. But he had a target on him. He had on his back. And wherever he went, he would go right down those rivers. He would go, right in those areas, and everything he did was glorified in the North in the newspapers and was vilified in the South. And you can only imagine. Can you imagine him cruising into Charleston after it fell?
Oh my God!
Just the grin in his face.
I can imagine, dude, where's my boat guy?
Well, that's the thing is I love the fact that he is, he gets into he pulls into Charleston, and there's the former boat owner who's staring right at him. And it's just, and you can tell how pissed off he is specifically about it, that he lost his boat. But he got lucky though, because Ferguson, he's going to discover the boat's gone early in the morning with enough time to send the bells and whistles to close the harbor. And for whatever reason, maybe it's embarrassing he lost his boat, he sits on it, doesn't tell anybody for a couple hours. So by the time by the time he finally does, Smalls is gone. If he would have immediately told everybody, they would have stopped Smalls before he got to Sumter. Yeah. So that's where you get lucky.
It's interesting. And I mean, like the whole thing going back to Pemberton and the connections, what if Pemberton doesn't get sent to Vicksburg? Who is going to be in charge of Vicksburg now? Like on the Confederate side of it?
Who the hell knows? I mean, probably Joseph Johnson. Probably
he was over in Jackson. I mean, we both stepped in it yesterday for playing the what if game on Twitter, but whatever.
Well,
but it's an interesting thing. Like, it probably would have been Joseph E. Johnston.
I mean, Joseph E. Johnston was over in Jackson. I imagine he would have been. I think they probably would have consolidated those two armies and put them in a big. I mean, who the hell knows? But it ended up being Pemberton, and it doesn't matter who the hell was there. They were going to get sieged. But I always thought it was cool that he was sitting there in Vicksburg, eating garbage. Because he let Smalls escape.
Yep.
That was, and there are so many stories in the Civil War like that just that there's little things happen that cause these butterfly effect deals that happen later in the war that are so specific to specific events, and they all come together in these stories, which is so cool about it. It's so much fun to study these.
I'm trying to think of other ones like that too. Like, I mean, I know we've encountered a ton of them in doing the podcast and all that. Just like one little thing happens and it's like, oh, if that hadn't happened, then it would be completely different,
Well, there's a whole bunch of them. You talk about a million different things. Obviously, we talk specifically about, even June 1st, 1862 with Johnson getting shot. Leads us to Lee coming in.
Yeah. And like, again, if Johnson's not shot, where does that leave General Lee? Like, where does he go? And it's like, he's playing the what if game with it.
He was, basically in charge of the coastal defenses as well as the defenses around Richmond. He was an advisor to Jeff Davis. But I mean, he got his chance, and and don't forget too, he got a lot of shit for Cheat Mountain in West Virginia.
Oh yeah,
fighting West Virginia is hard. It's hard.
It's hard.
And so he kind of had to work his way through again. But there's so many stories that, like we said before, this war, the Union was 4th and 10 many times. It seems like they converted every single time. To use the football phrase. It's just the way it was.
Tony said he thought it was Raleigh who was the first to notice the boat was gone.
Right, it was Raleigh. He's correct. It was Raleigh who did that.
Did Pemberton invent Coke?
That was the other John Pemberton.
Yeah, there's two John Pembertons, and
there's 2 Jeff Davises and 2 John Pembertons. Yeah. It was. I take that back. I was going to say it was Raleigh who noticed the boat was gone, because he was the one who was staying with the family with those 2 other subordinates. But Ferguson was there when he sailed back in time. When he came back into harbor, he's because it's funny. Raleigh in both Hancock and Pitcher, the 3 officers who owned the boat, they all got their asses in trouble for violating that General Order No. 5. But you know how they got off? is they weren't officially members of the Confederacy. They were hired hands.
Yeah.
So they were like independent contractors. They're like, we didn't freaking know. We're not responsible for shit.
It's like contract work. They're contracting out people. And they're like, we don't know what's going on.
And Ferguson had leased the boat, the planter, to the Confederacy.
Yeah.
But those 3 officers were not Confederate officers. They were just hired hands for whatever reason. So that's how they got off.
Yeah.
Otherwise, they'd have been SOL and JWF.
Lee was pissed, and we had that, like, the note that he wrote to Pemberton where he was like, this had better not happen again. Because, and I mean, at the time, like, the Confederates cannot afford to lose ships, and they lose one. Not only do they lose the ship, but as we mentioned, they lose he's got that book in there, which is all the signals.
It was the guns, though.
Yeah. The guns too. Because
it was the guns, and they took all the guns on the Stedto River, which basically stopped one of the. If you've been to Charleston, there's a bunch of rivers that all flow in, and the Stedto River was one of the primary ones. But because a lot of the troops got shipped out of Charleston to fight in different parts of the war, you had the Maryland campaign getting ready to start. You had Second Manassas, all going on around this time. So they had to pull troops out, and just like at Gettysburg with Bigelow, they had to fill in the gaps without people with guns. And they did that. And so the guns that were designed to protect the harbor got lost.
Yeah, they're gone. And the other thing too that was important was Small's knowledge of Charleston Harbor, that he knew it so well. And then the troops that had been in Charleston originally, they were going to 2 places, Tennessee and Virginia. So that's interesting as well, that there's stuff happening that is pulling them away.
And if you're, Rosalie Ripwell, if you're the guy in charge of, he's the underling to Pemberton, you want to talk about are you shitting me moments, because he's in charge. You had one job: protect the guns around Charleston Harbor. And then the fact that 2 weeks before Smalls took off, you had 15 slaves sneak out on a barge the same way, and this is the second time in like 15 days that you had people steal boats. No surprise he got fired, and no surprise that Pemberton got demoted and sent over. Yeah. But this is those real time things that happen that affect the future, that ripple later.
Oh yeah. Yeah. The big thing with Pemberton going to Vicksburg is huge. And I mean, not that it works out that well for him, but it's this whole
Pemberton's not, he's not just Stonewall Jackson or George.
Which Pemberton grave did we see in Philly? Was that
that was John C. Pemberton. No, that was Pemberton. So I'm pretty sure it was. I confused those two. One of them was buried in Philly. I thought it was the one, and I could be wrong. I'm not 100% sure which one we saw.
He was a Northerner, right? Like Vicksburg, Pemberton.
But the Coke guy was not the guy we're talking about. The Coke. No. This is the other one. That's a good question. I thought it was John C. But
I think it might have been because he was born in the North, and then he married a Southerner, and that's how he ended up down there.
Right.
I think that was his story. But yeah, it's kind of like too, going back to like Vicksburg and the connections, like you think the Battle of Stones River, one of the reasons that they can't get on that road is because troops have been pulled from Bragg's army to go to Vicksburg. So there's that, there's that connection there too. Like, what if those troops hadn't been pulled? It's another. What if
that? By the way, that cemetery in Philly that we went to that day is an awesome cemetery.
Oh yeah, that's where Meade is.
I mean, Meade's buried there. Pemberton's buried there. You know who else is buried there? Is Henry Bingham from Gettysburg with Armstead. He's buried there too. There's a lot of Civil War. That's cool.
Yeah, Caleb mentioned Vicksburg. Pemberton was from Pennsylvania.
Yes, that's what I thought. Yeah. I was pretty sure it was the Vicksburg Pemberton. But you sometimes you overthink these things. But they're all there in that cemetery, and people on this thing, just like us, you love cemeteries. You love walking the cemeteries.
That was so cool.
I thought Bingham's grave was cool for me, was because the Masonic connection and the Gettysburg connection.
Yeah.
And the fact that he's buried, and he's one of those people you'll go visit, and he'll be the only guy you only visit for years to see him, which is too bad.
I loved seeing Meade's grave. That was like in my top 5 of Civil War graves that I wanted to make sure that I got to see. And it was like, that was really cool. I definitely want to go back there too. And his wife is there too. And so is his, I think, Minnie Meade is buried there as well. Right?
Minnie Meade, yeah.
That meme you made for that one time, that was great.
Oh, it's pretty funny. But no, it's fun finding these. It's so cool to hit some of these. So yeah, that's pretty neat. But there's a lot of connections with this stuff when you see them in real life. And we said before, Andrew's on here. Francis Channing Barlow's great grandfather was buried right around the corner over here. You literally, Mary can stumble there on a Friday night back. That's how close we are to his.
That was cool. That was cool seeing that the descendants that he's a Mayflower descendant.
Yeah, the Warren family. Yeah, but Laurel Hill's a great cemetery. And it's one of the few cemeteries you go. They have a gift shop.
Yeah.
So we bought some stickers and what else?
And t-shirts. We got t-shirts. So I've never bought a t-shirt from a cemetery before. I'm like, this is awesome.
So right when you pull in, there's a big gift shop of Laurel Hill Cemetery in Philly. I don't want to say it's my favorite cemetery because there's been so many good ones, but it's one of the cooler ones.
Yeah,
it is. And it's admittedly it's not in the nicest part of Philadelphia. It's not. But then again, is there a nice part of Philadelphia?
I was just gonna say,
but regardless, it's definitely if you're in Philly, or you're in that area, you got to go to Laurel Hill because it's a gorgeous cemetery, and and you can go see Meade. It's a very very just nondescript cemetery. I think it says General George Meade at rest. That's all it says on it.
Yeah.
But you can see Pemberton, go see Bingham, go see some other ones. It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
And you go see the Rocky graves, Mary.
Yeah, that's really cool that's in there too. And then Barb mentions that yes, he is buried, John C. Pemberton, but is buried in East Laurel. Andrea Quinn said you need to go see Barlow's grave. You and I went to see him.
We did see Barlow's grave.
That's where he is buried in Boston area.
Right by my alma mater. Right over there, but not far from Chestnut Hill. But we went to we went not too long ago to Mount Auburn. Speaking of cemeteries,
yeah, Dave Pellin mentions that one.
Mount Auburn is probably the king. And Forest Hills is another one in the Boston area here, which is really really cool too. That has a lot of guys like Lord Garrison are buried there. But Mount Auburn is like a who's who of Civil War. I mean, it's not to mention it is spectacular. We're going to be going to Hollywood Cemetery, Mary.
We are, yeah. Dave and Lisa mentioned that it's cool. We're going to be going there. I definitely want to see that.
So while this is in my head now, is Lisa Samia, the great Lisa. She, we said before, she's, in my opinion, the best Civil War poet that's alive today.
Yeah,
she is doing a presentation April 1st at Tredegar in Richmond.
Yeah,
and we're going down for that. So if you're in that area, go check out Lisa's presentation that she's going to do. Is it Nameless Faces Women Civil War?
Yeah, I think so. I think so. Yeah, no, but she's got a presentation there. We'll be there for that, and I know there's a few other people going too. So if anybody's in that area of Richmond on April the 1st, definitely check that event out.
So we're going to go to the Hollywood Cemetery. We're going to go to Cold Harbor.
Yep.
And we're going to go see the town, and then we're going to see the highlight, of course, is Lisa's thing, which is right in the museum of the Confederacy.
Yeah, it's Civil War. Well, it's not called the Museum of the Confederacy anymore. I think it's called the Civil War Museum or something like that. Or American Civil. It's the former Museum of the Confederacy.
That's how I know it. So
that's how I know it too. It took me forever to make the name switch. I still sometimes call the Museum of the Confederacy, but it's.
But if you go on their website, if you go on Lisa's site, you can get the information for it. It's a free event. You got to pay to get in the museum, but it's worth it. But you sign up for it, you got to sign up to get into it because that's what we did. So definitely do it. Supplies are running low, Mary. So actually, who knows they are.
I just realized that we can see that day at the museum is Claiborne's coat. It's there.
Yeah,
I think that'll be cool.
But if you haven't seen her do a presentation, you really should. We've been blessed to see her do her thing at over at Bel Air in the
We've
Booth
seen her
House.
present a few times on virtually and in person too, which is pretty cool.
But if you go, definitely drop us a line. Because maybe we'll get a beer somewhere, but it has happened before.
Yep, it has.
That was fun last weekend, by the way. Speaking of beer, that was a good time at Forest today.
No, it was. We had some great conversations. Lots of great people came out, so that was pretty cool. We'll probably be doing an event similar to that when we're there for the anniversary. Probably at Foursquare, because that just worked perfectly. And that time of year, we can at least be outside. MJ said, "Please say hi to General Garnett for me at Hollywood." Oh wait, he's at the Stonewall.
Yeah, he's who knows where the hell he is. He's
nobody knows.
He didn't make it. He got vaporized, but that's what we're going to be doing. So, and then of course we've said this before. We'll do another meet and greet hangout for the anniversary.
Yeah. As I was just saying, is we'll do one sometime on that one of the anniversary days, we'll do one in the afternoon because that worked. If anybody's in town, then they can still like get home.
That was a fun weekend though. MJ apparently she's a huge fan of Gettysburg College out there. She saw that mascot and she just she jumped all over that. She just loved that so much, and she became indoctrinated into Yingling Light, which is always near and dear to my heart. But that would be.
Caleb's wondering if we know of a good cigar shop in Gettysburg because he would like to have a cigar with us. Yes, we do. Union Cigar.
Union Cigar. We were there last weekend. So Caleb, when you come, we'll definitely head over there. I'll take you to it because they have great cigars, and you can sit in the back and just smoke them. And they're just in their lounge.
It's an awesome place. Glowjam mentions Verner's Ginger Ale was established in 1866 when an experiment was left in a barrel, forgotten through the Civil War, and aged to discovered goodness, plus Boston cooler goodness.
I'm telling you, but it's definitely fun. But Union Cigar is a blast. That's a good time. I went there a couple of years ago with some Battlefield guys, and we were sitting in the back watching the movie Gettysburg because they have TVs. And it was one of those cool experiences, just sitting there smoking cigars, talking to some people we know, and just watch the movie. It was a good time. But Union Cigar is great.
Yeah,
and you get a Masonic discount on cigars too because it's owned by Freemasons.
Well, I can't get that discount, but you can.
Well, we don't really exist though. It's
God. But yeah, it was a really good time last weekend. Like we got to hang out with MJ, Gentili, Samia's, Jacob was there from he's one of our friends. He's got the History Book podcast, which is really cool.
That was cool. Matt Callers from AG was there with Michael. Gary Edelman came by.
Yeah,
Pete Carmichael was there.
He happened to be there. He wasn't there for our thing, but he happened to be there, so it was cool to meet him too.
It was pretty cool to hang out with a lot of these folks, and of course Tom McMillan was there. Our
friend Lynn was there too.
She was there. It was a lot of cool people. And so it's nice to kind of put the name to the faces sometimes and kind of talk to these people. But definitely, we'll definitely do that again. That was a good time. I mean, I'm always up for beer and shenanigans there. You know that.
Yeah. Mike said, "I'll be at Gettysburg in May. I plan on going to Fourscore. What beer do you recommend?"
Gettysburg. I mean, Fourscore has got.
They've got fruit beers, IPAs.
It depends. It depends what you like. Gettysbrow is a lager. It's probably one of the lighter ones, but it's really, really good. They got some 15% alcohol beers there. If you want to wake up with no pants on the next day, it depends. It depends on what your flavor is, but there's a lot of cool places to go. But Fourscore, say hi to Diane for me. Tell her the revolution lives. She's a bartender. Awesome. So.
Yeah, she's really cool. But yeah, it was a great time. MJ said we didn't even fight in Cemetery Hill. Maybe in July. Well, we have talked about doing like a live stream with her. She and I talked about it, about kind of dispelling that myth about Howard and Hancock not liking each other.
That's true. MJ is going to be our guest on our next episode there.
She is. Yes, we're going to be doing an episode with her soon to talk about, we have to work out the exact details, but Pauline Cushman. We're
going to be doing an episode on Pauline Cushman, who she's probably, I mean, is it safe to say she's probably the expert on Cushman?
I think she is. She's done her research on it. I think she deserves that title.
I don't think there's anybody you can put on who knows more than Cushman than MJ. So we're happy to have her come on. So we'll talk. We'll talk about that. We'll have a good time with that. There might even be some libations drink. She'll probably be the first guest we ever drink during the episode with. We usually don't.
Yeah, we usually don't. No, we drink with Jay Price. We always have a drink with Jay Price when she's on for a Halloween episode. But yeah, I think she will be the first guest that we have a drink with.
That's a good time. So no, but that'll be a good time. So we'll definitely do that. But I'm looking forward. I'm looking forward to her things. Lisa's thing is going to be great. And Jimmy always is. But going down there, hopefully there's a big crowd. We get a lot of people. I know we're going to come down. I think Ski's coming down. I think Gentili's coming down.
Yep, there's a few people from here that are coming down to it.
Hopefully John Buchanan comes. If you're in that area, try to come by for it. Because we'll have a good time with that, and I think you'll enjoy it. So she's the best, so no question with that.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to like seeing Hollywood Cemetery and seeing Cold Harbor, and finally seeing Richmond, because I've never been there before, which shocks the hell out of me that I've never been there. I've driven by it a couple times, but never, stopped to.
You've had a tough life. You've driven by so many things.
Kennesaw was probably the toughest one.
Yeah.
Like, I'm like, can we stop? Nope, we have to keep going.
we'll be at Kennesaw in a few months actually, so that'll be cool. So we'll have MJ on, some more Cushman. She's a guru, so we'll enjoy that.
Yeah.
But that'll be the next one. We're gonna pick a date to get that recorded.
Yeah. Oh, Rob Dalby said Denise and he and his wife Denise will be there, so that's cool. We'll get to see them.
Cool. Excellent. So that's pretty good. So we'll definitely, hopefully we get a good crowd for that, and then we'll do something afterwards, probably that night. Whoever's around, maybe go find a brewery somewhere in Richmond.
Maybe
we can.
But yeah, I am looking forward to seeing that museum because it's one I've wanted to get to for a long time, not just because Claiborne's Code is there, although I do find it cool that they have that. I think his Kepi is there too, but I seem to think his Kepi might be elsewhere. I'm not sure though.
Well, I mean, between that museum and the one up in Harrisburg, you can see a lot of cool stuff. We love the Harrisburg one.
Oh, the Harrisburg one is amazing.
And so we'll be, speaking of that, we'll be doing some stuff with Gettysburg Foundation here pretty soon too.
We will. Yeah. We'll have to hammer out the whole details with that, but that's pretty
speaking cool. of Gettysburg Foundation, Mary, how cool was that thing we went to, that Ticket to the Past?
Oh yeah, that was, yeah. So Caleb mentions his Kepi's in Nashville. Claiborne's Kepi's in Nashville.
Yeah. No, it's okay. We'll see. But so Gettysburg Foundation, which is the kind of the nonprofit wing of Battlefield there, they're opening up these different things in town now. There's the children at Gettysburg, but they just opened one up at the Gettysburg Rail Station, the Lincoln train station, across from Lincoln Diner, and it's a virtual reality experience where you go in there and you put those things on and you kind of get to experience what it was like by one of three different people. The one I did was Basil Biggs. Yeah. Right. He was the one who had to go and he dug up the bodies and brought them to the National Cemetery. But it's so realistic and he tells a story of him. It's very unique to Gettysburg.
Yeah, it's an augmented reality. So I did the nurse, I think her name was Cornelia Hancock. It was amazing. Really encourage anybody in Gettysburg to visit there. And I was thinking, I really hope more museums that are connected to the Civil War start doing that, because it is a great way, I think, especially for children. I thought it was appropriate for maybe, I don't know, somebody 10 and up maybe to do.
I mean, kids who are younger into the VR stuff. I mean, as long as it's a little, your equilibrium gets thrown off a little bit there, the equilibrium on your brain.
But, it's a little weird at first.
But I mean, Cornelia Hancock, the nurse, Basil Biggs, and then there was a musician who I'm blank on the name. But I did Biggs, and he talked about how it's not graphic, but you're seeing him digging up bodies, and he talks about his experience, what he did, what it was like to be in the town at the battle, what he did afterwards, and we always talk about personal stories and personal experiences, and he talks about there's an actor who plays him and plays her there. Who talks about what they saw in a first person, and it's very powerful. And they just opened it up, and it's definitely mandatory. And then the new Adams County Museum opens on April 15th by the old Almshouse. Yeah, and that'll be cool. So there's a lot of cool. If you've been to Gettysburg and you think you've been there, been there, done that. There's a lot of new stuff in town now. Yeah, you definitely got to check out.
It's really cool. CD mentions that while on a work trip, I went to the Harrisburg Museum, had the place myself, and it's simply amazing. Highly recommend to anyone. It is, and that's another place too that the displays there, they have the artifacts, but they also have these amazing dioramas, life-size dioramas that are very realistic, and you get a feel for what it was like. I love the Fort Sumter part. You walk in this room, it's dark, and you feel like you're on the fort, and you can hear them bombarding it.
Well, they have the Alonzo Cushing thing. Remember that?
Yeah,
they have the staff. I mean,
yeah, it's graphic, and I mean, I don't do well with medical stuff at all. And the other amazing museum is Seminary Ridge Museum.
Yeah, and they got their event next weekend. So
that's another thing. March 4th. So next weekend, if anybody, I think they might have some tickets left, but there's also a virtual option too. Seminary Ridge Museum, as well as Jim Hessler, Eric Lindblade from Battle of Gettysburg podcast, and then Stu Dempsey. The three of them are all licensed battlefield guides, and Pete Mealy and Cody Ish from Seminary Ridge Museum are doing an event about I think it's kind of the lead up in the first day of the battle. So it's in person, but also virtual option as well. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, we'll be in town next weekend again, but we're not gonna. I don't think we're gonna be going to the stand. I think it's sold out. But
no, we're not gonna. Unfortunately, we're not gonna be going to it. But we know a few people who are. But definitely, like if you can do the virtual option, definitely a great thing. And same with in person. Oh, hey Bjorn, he's on here. He said, "Great episode. Glad to hear about Robert Smalls. Thank you."
Thanks Bjorn. Hey, what's going on, dude?
Bjorn's a good guy. Yeah, Abraham Lincoln Bookshop is amazing.
I've
only been there virtually with you.
God, I dreamt about that freaking place. That's how cool that was.
That place was cool. Caleb said, "Yeah, we are going to Atlanta soon." You said, "Be sure to hit the Museum of History there." I still want to get to the Cyclorama, which I think is where the Museum of History is, but I don't know if we're gonna have time for that.
We're gonna basically jam in. We're gonna get there on the Wednesday. Right, Wednesday.
Mm-hmm.
We're going. We're spending that in Andersonville.
Yeah,
and then we're going to Ezra Church, Atlanta, Oakland Cemetery, Kennesaw. Yep. Then we're going to see the Braves opening day against San Diego, and then we're going to be going to Chattanooga, Chickamauga for the rest of the weekend. So it's going to be a lot of stuff we'll be packing into that. So we'll see if we can have time, but we'll be running around because that's time tends to disappear into these things.
Oh, it does. Yeah, it's Andrea said she's going to do the virtual thing too. I'm so glad they are doing a virtual option for that event too.
That'll be a good time, and they're good guys, and they've caught a lot of shit lately, which I think is very unfair.
It is.
But that's going to be a fantastic event. We got to find a way into this. We got to see if we can.
I don't want to weasel my way in. Jeez, I don't want to do that.
We're going to pull some strings with old Hester, see if we can hook a brother up here. I don't know. We'll see how it's sold up. Maybe we can sneak in somehow. That'd be cool.
But yeah, we'll be around in town again next weekend. So after the event, maybe we'll meet up with some people. But it'll be pretty cool. I know we're going to be touring one of our friends around who has not been in Gettysburg since she was 12 years old. So that's going to be fun.
Yeah, that's neat because obviously the battlefield has changed so much, and I know Round Top's still closed and Devil's Den still kind of.
But there's so much to see there. It's like MJ and I were talking about this, about how somebody had made a comment like, "Oh, Round Top is closed. I guess I can't go." It's like you can go to Culp's Hill, you can go to Barlow's Knoll, you can go to
we got some. We stumbled all through Culp's Hill last weekend.
Yeah.
And it's great that you can go down to the Forbes Rock. You could go to that second Maryland, go see the Confederate grave burial site, and you could go walk the. We found we were able to go to the Colbert Rock last week.
Yeah, that was cool seeing.
And so if anybody has seen the Colbert Rock at Culp's Hill, down a lower Culp's Hill, good luck getting there in the summertime with the bugs and the sticky burrs and all that shit. But this time of year, you're able to get back there and go see it, and it's one of those really cool, soldier, rock scrapings that are very few and far between. And so it's definitely cool to do that, no question.
Ben mentions he's going to be making his first trip to Gettysburg.
Oh well, better late than never. So Gettysburg, you're gonna have to I've been at Gettysburg more times than any normal human should, but every time we go, there's something new to see. Because Gettysburg, there was one time I was there a couple of years ago. I was stumbling around Baltimore Street, and someone pulled over and asked me where the battlefield was. I go, "You're in it. The whole damn town's a battlefield." It depends on what part of the battle you want to talk about. But you could spend. There are 3 distinct days if you just talk about the specific battle, and you could spend 2 to 3 days alone on each of the days, and even that you're not going to get enough. That's what's good about it. There's always stuff to see. It always brings you back, no question.
Yeah. Andrea mentions, and we were here, the Confederate grave area on Culp's Hill is creepy. Weird shit happens there. That place is weird. We took Gentili and Jacob there, and it's weird. Bjorn said, if you can't see Little Round Top, check out Neil's Lane. You might need a guide.
Yeah, Neil's Lane. It's also called Lost Lane. It's on private property, and the way you do it is you can't just go there. You can probably, but it's privately owned property, and if you go there, you're going to piss off the owner. It has some monuments. It's got a cool little area. Very few people visit it, but for that reason, you have to kind of go. It's by Wolf Hill, that area. But if you go to the visitor center and you go to the desk and you go see my friend Matt and go see any of the ranger people, they can call the owner for you and say, "Is it okay for people to go over there?" And they'll say yes. They usually do. Yeah. And then you'll drive over there and he'll give you a tour of it. But that's the way to do it. So don't be a dick and just stumble over there, because that's not cool. Go over to the visitor center and make an arrangement to go see. It's called Lost Lane. It's called Neil Avenue. But it's one of those few places that's very like by McAllister's Mill. If you want to go visit that, this the Underground Railroad stuff that's over there. But it is on private property, so don't stumble over there. But you can go to the visitor center and call ahead. And the guy's very, when we did it, he's happy to have people over there. He just doesn't want people showing up on the property.
Yeah, that's it. Dave mentions that too, that they can connect you with Dean, who owns the surrounding property.
And Dean's very good about it. Very good about it. But again, show some respect. That's all.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's I was just thinking, like, like Gettysburg is, every time I go there, I'm like, wow, this is a gigantic place. But wait till we go to Chickamauga. That battlefield is gigantic. It is, and there's so many like little areas. The terrain is so different. It's interesting to go to Gettysburg and then go to Chickamauga, and you can do a lot of comparing and contrasting, because I try to find, places at Gettysburg where I'm like, okay, this is kind of like Chickamauga, but the terrain there is just so different. You have like a meadow, an open meadow, and then you go into forest, and then you go into this like area where you can't imagine how the men were like able to climb up it with their guns and their packs and stuff, because there's roots coming out of the ground everywhere. Snodgrass Hill is like, you can look and you can see all the different types of terrain that are there, but it is a huge battlefield, gigantic. I think it's actually one of the bigger ones, but I know it's a little bit bigger than Gettysburg, that's for sure.
Gettysburg, 6,000 acres.
Yeah, I think Chickamauga might be, I'm not sure, but I think Chickamauga might be a little bit more than that. But it's like, it is such a cool place to visit, and it like, they've got this rivalry with Gettysburg.
Yeah, well, I think Chick Chat feels as a rivalry. I don't think Gettysburg.
Oh, there is, but I don't think Gettysburg sees it that way, and I think they play it up a little bit. But it's funny, like when like Chickamauga is the first one opened in 1895, and then Gettysburg is opened after that. Well, they had to take some of the cannons from Chickamauga and send them to Gettysburg because they needed more cannons. And there's a shit ton of cannons at Chickamauga. Clay mentions that Chickamauga is amazing. The terrain today is very similar to what it was at the time of the battle. That's very true. I think it's like Shiloh. I think Shiloh is pretty well preserved. Bjorn would know that because I think he used to work there. But yeah, how Chickamauga looks today is a lot like it would have looked at the time of the battle.
Well, the Western Theater and the Mississippi are benefited because there's not as much, we talked a lot about Chantilly and places like that. Besides Gettysburg, Antietam, and Bull Run,
Monocacy is pretty, it's okay. It's not as much.
But compared to like the Kennesaw Mountains, Cheatham Hill, places like that. I mean, granted, Ezra Church is long gone, Atlanta's gone.
Yeah.
But a lot of Vicksburg is gone, but there is some in Franklin, but there are some really pristine places. I mean, where Gettysburg is they're slowly trying to recoup the land. I know Pickett's Buffet. Yeah. I know you're heartbroken about this. It's going to be going away. The 8th Ohio area is going to be a little more open, but Antietam, Antietam and Bull Run are absolutely stunning in the Eastern Theater because they're pristine. Especially Antietam.
And I think a lot of it goes back to the preservation efforts as well. Dave said Western Theater people can be a little touchy. I'm one of those Western Theater people. I mean, I'm into the Eastern Theater too, but I'm sort of more Eastern or Western Theater. Bjorn says Shiloh's 4,000 acres. Caleb said Chickamauga is the very first battlefield. It's got a good visitor center. Yeah, it definitely does. And Jason said he's dying to visit Chickamauga. It's his favorite battle.
Joe, Chickamauga is a mess. I know that's probably your favorite battle.
It and Gettysburg are tied for first for my favorite for different reasons. Chickamauga is one of those battles that is so tough to understand because there's all these moving parts that are happening. And it's like, you described it perfectly when you said it's like a bar fight that spills into one room to the other, but each room is different. When you go to it, like the area where the Lytle monument is very like it's back in the forest, but where he was killed was in a meadow because his men came out through the trees, open up into a big meadow, and it's so like I was in awe when I was there because I'm like, how did they fight this battle? It gives you a greater appreciation for it, I think, and somewhere to like the preservation of Kennesaw happens because of people who fought there and Earl J. Hess tells us in his book about Kennesaw Mountain that there was a guy visiting there with his daughter and he had fought there, and his daughter's like, well, this should be preserved. And he ended up buying the land. And that's what began the preservation efforts at Kennesaw. And I can see, he was a Union guy. I think I can see why he wanted to preserve that land, because it was such a tough battle for them to fight. You have guys there that were in the Eastern Theater, and then they got to Kennesaw and they were like, oh shit, this is a whole new game,
Kennesaw is pristine. Big Kennesaw, Little Kennesaw, Pigeon Hill. You can visit them all. Cheatham Hill is obviously the best part about it. And again, it's one of those battlefields you go to, and you can, for the most part, Kennesaw Mountain is just kind of a walking park now.
Yeah.
People tend to just to go for what they don't realize the history. There's cannons, and it's got fantastic breastworks up there. To be honest, they're pristine. But if you've been at Cheatham Hill, you got to walk to it and find it. It's way back there, but it's definitely worth it. There's so many.
I've never been there, but I think it's one of those places I'm going to get there and I'm going to be like, what the F was Sherman thinking? Why?
Well, yeah, I mean, it definitely was. And you've got the Fighting McCooks and all these dudes who fought there. And obviously Benjamin Cheatham and those guys. But it's one of those terrains where you look at it. What's cool about the Battle of Cheatham Hill was they had a halftime. They stopped.
And they were playing cards and stuff with each other. And
so halfway through the battle, they stopped because there's a lot of injured and dead. And they basically had an agreement. Let's just take a break for a couple hours and bury the dead, protect the wounded. And while they were doing that, you had Union Confederate soldiers, trading tobacco and water and playing cards and hanging out, just shooting the shit right in the battlefield. It's just like a big picnic. Then they all said, okay, game on, and they all went back to their sides and are fighting again. And it's one of those rare type of, like Spangler Spring is very overrated. There's that rumor, there's a legend that they had water together. It never really happened.
Yeah.
But at Cheatham Hill, it really happens.
It's recorded in some of the soldier diaries. Right. And Caleb said, by looking at the ground at Cheatham's Hill, you can see how easily there would have been heavy casualties. And Jason mentions that he's always fascinated by Thomas at Chickamauga, who's his favorite Union generally. And he does, he's the one that's there, but then he ends up leaving, and he basically has to tell some of the guys, you got to stay behind and you're going to get captured.
Yeah, I mean, and that was very similar to what we talk a lot about Charles Tilden at Gettysburg.
Same, very, very same situation.
Snodgrass Hill, Billy Goat Hill. You have to sacrifice a handful of men to let the rest of the army escape to get back to Chattanooga. Now, Rosecrans was already there.
Yeah.
Thomas did take off, and he left his men, and he did go back too.
Yeah.
But he does get that Rock of Chickamauga nickname.
And so I think I think he kind of was like, okay, Rosecrans is gone. What am I going to do? But yeah, he had to tell some guys, you need to hold the Lafayette Road because we have to get back into Chickamauga or Chattanooga. And that's why it's, it is a victory for the Confederates, but at the same time, it's kind of empty because the Union is sitting back in Chattanooga, still holding the city that they need. And I think it's just Bragg kind of fumbles his way. I mean, it's Bragg. He fumbles his way through pretty much everything. But they can't take it. So in some ways, I think the Union, and obviously there's this, just the siege that happens, and then it breaks with Sherman and the Cracker Line opens up and all that. But I think Thomas is one of my favorite generals too to study, not just because of Chickamauga, but because of Nashville, because of, was it Mill Springs?
Mill Springs.
Yeah. And that's one where nobody knows about that one as much. And
Mill Springs is really where George Thomas kind of made his hay. He really did. Now he gets a lot of credit for Chickamauga, Chattanooga. He certainly does. But Mill Springs was really where he got his name on the map. And that's an interesting battle too.
Yeah, that's where that guy got shot because he didn't have his glasses on. Right?
You've got
couldn't see who he was with.
Most of these battles are you drop your glasses, you're riding on a horse, you ride right into the Union line. And
wasn't the situation like, who are you? Oh, I'm this guy.
They've tried to hide his Southern accent. They probably asked him, how do you make grits? And he goes, I don't know. And they faked him out and they shot him. He's gone. But there's a lot of cool things like that. But there's a lot of good small little battlefields. But for the most part, the smaller ones are nothing but dog walking parks now. Chantilly comes to mind. Bristow Station comes to mind. If you've been at Bristow Station, Virginia, not far from Manassas, it's all you see is soccer moms walking dogs with their coffee. That's all it is. That's what it is.
Bjorn said Zolly. It was Zollicoffer.
Right, Felix Zollicoffer.
He was the one that we talked about. Like, he was one of these ones killed early on in the war. That could have been like, if he had lived, it would have been like, holy shit.
If he had one of those Chris Sabo sunglass things, you know who he is, the Cincinnati Red. He had the hell his glasses on his head. If he had one of those, he probably would have lived. But Felix Zollicoffer dropped his glasses. And he rode into the Union lines. But you're right, though. He was a big loss to the Confederacy at the time. People don't realize, most people haven't heard of Felix Zollicoffer because it was a small battle. It was early on. It was out in the Western Theater. But that was a big loss to the Confederacy with Zollicoffer. It really was.
I seem to recall that Jim Miller found his grave and he was like, had a tough time finding it, but he found where he was buried.
Yeah, no, there's no question about that. He just was. But there's a lot of guys like that.
But I loved studying Mill Springs because Jason said Thomas was a rock at Stones River too. He's one of the ones that is advising Rosecrans what to do. The two of them, Rosecrans and Thomas, worked very well together.
He was very conservative. He was very cautious.
He was a very different general than Grant, but what Thomas had against him was being a Virginian, and he was never trusted. And that's one thing. I think Lincoln was very prejudiced against that too, regarding him, because Battle of Mill Springs happens. The Union needs a victory, and Harper's Weekly's like, we're going to put Thomas on the front cover, and Lincoln's like, no, you're not, because he's a Virginian. And that I just was like, what the heck? Like, you needed the victory, but then you're like, nope, he's a Virginian. We can't do that. He might, this attitude, he might turn at any moment. He's a very different general than Grant. He was very methodical, really thought things out, before he did them, which Grant was a different type of general.
Oh, definitely. But I mean, there's a lot of people like that. Thomas, unfortunately, he dies pretty soon after the war too. He burns all his papers. Yeah. And so there's so much historical treasure lost by a lot of these guys for whatever reason.
I would love to know some of the shit he said to his wife, because I think his wife to him was like Meade's wife. Meade told Margaret a lot of stuff. I think Thomas was probably saying a lot of stuff to his wife, and he was like, you need to burn this shit.
If Thomas had written some sort of memoir like a Charles Wainwright did, specifically about Grant, Sherman.
Could you imagine if we found that?
But that would have been fascinating, because Charles Wainwright, he was an artillery guy. He fought at Gettysburg. He wrote a very opinionated memoir, which is if you're in Gettysburg, it's a must read. The Charles Wainwright Diary. It explains a lot, especially on the first day and the second day, down by the seminary, by Cemetery Hill. That's kind of where he was. But if Thomas had written one, I would have loved to have been a fly on the wall or get into Thomas's head, his opinion of Sherman, of how it was. Because there are different types of guys. I mean, Sherman, we said before, he's the Floyd Merriweather of the Civil War. He didn't attack front. He would bob and weave, hit the flanks, and that's how he did it. He wasn't that's why Cheatham Hill was such an anomaly for him, is that he hit straight on.
Isn't Thomas there saying like Thomas is like, oh no.
Thomas is like, I don't know if you should be doing this. I know this is not a very good idea. You might want to try to get, but the problem was Johnston had him pinned in, so he kind of put him in a corner, and he had no choice but to attack. But I would love to know his opinion of him, especially because Sherman did not have a great day at Chattanooga. He didn't. Right.
That is one of his worst days in the Civil War. And
he did not have a great day at Kennesaw.
No.
But I would love to know his opinion of Thomas, if you dig him up and put him on a sodium pentothal and ask him what he thought. Because that there's many guys like that. Many guys like that who you just wish they left papers. There are so many, because it would tie up so many gaps, so many, it wasn't like he was killed. It wasn't like he was Burbsy McPherson, who died suddenly. He's a guy who lived post-war, who just never wrote, and then when he did die, they burned everything. I
think he was bitter because of the way he had been treated, and the one that and Thomas is this guy at like Missionary Ridge when Sherman is not having a good day. Thomas is like, well, and then Grant's like, why are those guys going up Missionary Ridge? I didn't order them up that far. And Thomas is kind of like, I don't know.
And he also attacked the wrong hill. Sherman did.
Oh yeah. He attacked Billy Hill, and he was like, Claiborne was probably looking over. I'm like, why is he over there? We're over here. Yeah. And I mean, admittedly, Sherman is having a lot of personal stuff going on too. His son has died post Vicksburg campaign, and I think that was really affecting him at that time. But it still is not his greatest day at all. And the one thing, I got hit on this for Twitter, and it was just a joke, and it was meant to be a compliment. I said Thomas is like Eeyore.
Yeah.
And he's like this guy's like, oh no, like, oh bother kind of thing.
No, he definitely did. Thomas put up with a lot of shit. I mentioned before, he was a Virginian. He was hated by his family, but he was also not trusted by Sherman or Grant
or Lincoln,
Blackjack Logan, all the fun lovers in the Union, right?
Yeah.
So when Nashville happens, and Hood's doing his thing, and they're going to attack Nashville. They want to replace him because the snow is preventing the battle from starting.
Yeah.
And Grant himself, I think Blackjack made it as far as St. Louis.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. He was on his way to replace him. And then the battle happens, he wins, and then they all go back. But he was a guy who just simply wasn't trusted. And because I don't know if he thought he was going to Scooby-Doo it and take the mask off, and then he was going to be the villain, or what the hell was going to happen.
I just pictured that.
But that's kind of what was going on. I mean, some of these family things. I mean, you look at Jeb Stuart with his father-in-law.
Yeah.
Who stayed with the Union. He has that great quote that he'll regret that decision just once. It'll be continuously. That quote he had. And these old grudges never die.
They don't. No, and I mean, I still think some of the Thomas family that lives in Virginia, they still, like his descendants, they still don't really talk about him much at all. Bjorn does mention he says the Charles S. Wainwright diary.
That's a great one. The big three for me is Wainwright, Abner Small, and E.P. Alexander. Mm. Those three. Elijah Hunt Rhodes is a good one too, but those three, and the Company H one is pretty good too. But the Wainwright one and the Abner Small one are must reads because they're so honest. They were never meant to be published, and you get a real good insight into the daily goings on of some of these battles, about some of the shit that went on. And we study this stuff, and you see you see these lectures, and you see the podcasts. It sounds like it's so organized. These guys move this way, hit the foot. It was a complete shit show.
It's not.
And so every one of these things was a complete cluster. And so those guys really describe the reality of how we didn't know what the hell we were doing. Yeah. I mean, we said before, because a guy who gave Wainwright his order to go to the cemetery, because he was German, he didn't know what the hell he was saying, kind of like Gentili with the Australian accent, probably, speaking of the seminary. But he's told, he hears this jumbled word cemetery. He doesn't know what the hell he's saying. He turns around. There's the seminary. He goes, I guess that's where I'm supposed to go. Yep. For that reason, he defends the seminary, holds off Perrin's second wave to allow the first, who broke first, in the 11th Corps to get back to Cemetery Hill. That's how you get lucky. Yeah. And so when you read Wainwright's diary, he's like, I don't know what the hell he was saying. That's what I assumed he was saying. So there I was. Yeah. And so so sometimes you get lucky with history.
Oh yeah, no, Jason said Thomas was naive. He couldn't believe that Schofield was sending Grant nasty reports before the battle in Nashville. Yeah, Schofield's a guy that I don't think he liked Thomas very much. And like people are just
he was never trusted.
No.
Schofield's a guy who he's lucky to get through. He was brilliant at Spring Hill.
Oh, big time.
He was able to hold off. He was hold off the Confederates' Hood over Franklin. Was able to get back to Nashville. Mm-hmm. But I think he's one of those guys who felt that maybe he should be in the big chair for what he did.
I think he did too. Yeah.
Right. And so when you look at the fact that Grant and Sherman don't trust him, it's easy to kind of take your shots at him because he's probably not as popular as he probably should be. Yeah. But that's the stuff that was going on.
Yeah. I've always really admired and liked Thomas. I think because partly he's this Virginian who he knows, like, I'm not going to be trusted, but I'm standing by what I believe. And I'm going to fight for the Union. And he was a hardcore Union guy. Like, and I mean, good for him for, being able to be like, all right, this is where I stand on this, and he experiences prejudice because of that. And he's a very talented general, but I think some people like Sherman and Grant saw him as being slow, but I think more than that, I think it goes back to, it wasn't just the military stuff. I think it was the personal. He's a Virginian. We can't trust him for that reason. So the military stuff, like Grant saying he's slow or Sherman saying he's slow, is just kind of this front to really, we don't trust him and we think he might turn tail at any time. Frank mentions that his favorite Thomas moment was at Nashville when he hugged General A.J. Smith when his corps finally returned. Yeah,
the fighting 16th when A.J. Smith's another guy who goes under the radar. C.F. Smith. Speaking of Smiths, the Smith,
C.F. Smith, his death is
but there's a lot of people like that who are just under, that they're not that A-level superstar. They're being a C-level, but they have those voices, and without people like them, that the A-level ones don't become A-level, right? No.
Exactly. You have to have there's the people under you fighting the battle, and who your men are. Sherman gets a lot of credit for the March to the Sea, deservedly so, but you have to remember there's like these 60,000 troops
60,000
with him too, and he's got his generals as well, that you have Slocum and Howard that are having to basically, like, Sherman's basically having to leave kind of both of them to do their own thing and trust that they're going to do what needs to be done on this March to the Sea. But you also have the men too.
You can imagine speaking of the March to the Sea, 60,000 people going on these basically small country roads, working through Georgia. Think about anybody who's been through Georgia now. These big highways that cut right through it, but these small country, not just in Georgia, but anywhere. Moving troops and men around, and that's why Gettysburg happens, because the Army of Northern Virginia was spread over a 55-mile radius, west, north, and east of Gettysburg, a big umbrella. And when Lee blew the conch shell to get them all pulled back together again.
Yep, because Meade crosses the Potomac.
That's why it happened. So you couldn't move it. That's why you had divisions and corps moving in different directions, because it wasn't like a mass highway. For every 10,000 men, you needed 30 miles of road. When you factor in supplies, artillery, wagons, and we're talking 1860s. We're not talking 2023. The Long Island Expressway here. We're talking. You're talking about some of these small little country dirt roads that are no smaller than a small little country road. So the logistics is something that's really underrated. No question.
Big time, yeah. And I think too, in the Western, obviously it's a little bit. I guess the train's a little bit more flatter where Sherman's march is going. It's not like in Tennessee, Chickamauga, and all that, where it's a little bit more the hills and all that. Oh, Tony mentions he's glad Ellen McClellan didn't burn McClellan's papers.
Oh, he probably made sure you don't touch these. I want these framed.
Yeah, but those are not meant for public consumption.
I know that, but no, I wonder though if I'm just going to casually leave these behind.
Yeah, he's I hope this gets out someday.
I haven't found a real satisfactory answer why Thomas burned them. There's speculation.
I've read because he was bitter, that he just didn't want stuff getting out. I think he kind of had a little bit of General Warren. I shouldn't say General Warren syndrome, but
that's people's interpretation, though.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? There's no smoking gun saying I want this burned, because kind of the way you clear your history cache on the computer. I just don't see. It's really unfortunate.
Yeah.
And speaking of that, a lot of the John Wilkes Booth stuff we studied, so much stuff got destroyed because of incrimination, that there's so many stories that are lost to history. If all that stuff was still around today from all these things, how history could have been different, how interpretation would be different. So there's a lot of that,
Mike asked, do you think the official records are accurate? Heard a lot of reports were embellished, trying to find more personal accounts at Gettysburg. My opinion I think some of the official records are a little embellished.
Mike, the thing I will say about this, I know you're a Gettysburg guy. On the first day's battle, John Cleveland Robinson, part of the First Corps, his his division had fought on Oak Hill. And this is the Tilden stuff, the Henry Baxter stuff, the Gabriel Paul stuff, all this. That's what that fighting was. Everything that happened on that day to hold off Ewell's, Robert Rhodes, that entire battle of Gettysburg, that part of the battle was not mentioned by George Meade in this official battle report. Nothing that happened on that part of the battle under Robinson's division made the battle report. So there's a ton that's missing, and there's a ton that's embellished. Something like that is an unconscionable omission when you really study that part of the battle, but it happens a lot.
Yeah,
and who knows why? I love that division. It's one of my favorites in that battle. But it didn't make the report. And Robinson had to go later to explain everything that happened when he talked about Gabriel Paul being shot and surviving, killed in the 16th Maine, everything that happened, the 90th Pennsylvania, everything that happened on that part of the battlefield, none of it made the OR. And so that's an answer to your question right there.
Jim mentions Chamberlain rewrote his report of Gettysburg 3 different times. And this brings me to, this is actually I'm glad Mike mentioned this. So my first example is Ezra Church. If you read Blackjack Logan's official report on Ezra Church, there is one name you will not find in there, and that's Howard's. He was pissed off because 3 days before, Howard had been given command of the Army of the Tennessee. And a lot thought it should have went to Blackjack, but Blackjack was a political general. And I believe that Sherman put Howard in place because Howard was really the guy that he believed would do a good job. And Sherman did say he had the administrative side of it that was needed for that role. I think the political general thing factored into it too, but also the fact that Sherman needed a guy in place that was very calm, very kind of stoic, and that's how Howard is described. Blackjack is I love Blackjack. He's a bit of a loose cannon. He's not the guy you want in charge. But the other thing where we found that the official battle reports change is with Rosecrans and that battle with Grant. That Grant changes it. What is that one? Right. It's now escaping my memory, and we just talked about it in the episode about Rosecrans. Iuka. Grant changes his battle report on Iuka 3 times.
Well, Iuka is a different thing. And I think Grant, he gets a little unfair bashing on that. But again, he, with Logan and with Rosecrans, that whole thing is interesting because it kind of opens that window of what was Grant doing during that window that Rosecrans took full advantage of. But at the same time, it's hard. It's tough to. I don't think Grant was out getting banged up.
No.
Okay. I think it was a situation where he just didn't know what was going on. And he also had those 2 colonels who were supposed to report back to him who just never did. And so, but again, the buck stops here, right? If you're in the big chair, you need to be responsible. But again, it created that plausible story about what's going on with him. And Rosecrans took advantage of it. He did. Yeah. You can say, we both like Rosecrans, but again, he saw an opportunity to kind of push his name forward, and he did so at the expense of Grant, and it blew up in his face.
Yep.
Eventually it did, where Grant and Rosecrans never got along to the dying day, where Rosecrans is trying to deny him his pension, like at the end of his life, to stick it to him. So these old grudges die hard.
Oh, they do. And you can see that, getting back to Ezra Church, you can see that Blackjack, and rightfully so. I think he does have a reason to be upset. I probably would have been pissed off in that position too. It's like you're putting a guy from another army in charge of
you being pissed off.
God. Jason said, I've read that Sherman didn't like non-West Pointers because of previous dealings with McClernand and Hurlbut. That probably factors into it too. There is some.
I don't think Sherman liked anybody besides Grant.
I'm really beginning to see that.
I think personally, I think he was distrusting of almost everybody. I mean, he did see firsthand a lot of shit. He saw Rosecrans, specifically. He saw a lot of stuff with Halleck going to Grant after Donaldson and Henry. So I think he just was very in a cocoon. I also think Sherman wasn't all there.
No, Sherman was very, I don't know, I say this, or sometimes it's like, I don't know, Sherman definitely, I think today, I don't want to be an armchair psychologist. I think today Sherman would have been diagnosed with ADD because he definitely has a lot of
I think he was paranoid.
Yeah. Big time. I saw that in the Kentucky incident when he was removed from the army.
He was paranoid of that. He was. I also think he had a real fear of people like Claiborne, people like Nathan Bedford Forrest. Yep. I think he saw those two in his sleep, and I think he was afraid of being exposed, and I think that was a big part of it. But that being said, he was the only guy who could have pulled off the March of the Sea.
Exactly. Yep. Sherman. There was no one else that could have done that. He had the right guys under him. Slocum and Howard were brilliant at what they did. Slocum is another guy that is very underrated. When it comes to Civil War. I know, I still know what Buford.
So that Buford story was so funny that day. You want to see a guy's jaw drop, was your friend, the Buford guy, because it was the last thing he expected to hear. He had no.
He's like,
pretty funny.
What?
But it was pretty funny.
But yeah, I think Sherman is distrusting of a lot of people. You can even see it at Ezra Church. He's put Howard in charge. And Howard is trying to place his men, and he's protecting them as he does that, because I think he saw that the terrain at Ezra Church, and I don't know if he'd be able to see this today or not because it's in a built-up area. The terrain was a lot like Chancellorsville when von Gilsa was the one to get routed, and I think he saw that, and he's like, "Shit, I have to learn here from my mistake." And Sherman's like, "Dude, what are you doing? Like, you're being way too like protective and stuff." And Howard probably was kind of like, "Can you just let me do my thing?" And finally Sherman was like, "Fine, I'll let you do your thing, whatever." And Howard still maintains he's glad he did it that way to protect his troops.
No, he did the right thing with that. I mean, he definitely got Hood on a bad day at Ezra. I mean,
well, it was SD Lee. Did SD Lee have a good day?
But I mean, like he wasn't up front. He couldn't even physically barely even get on a horse.
Yeah.
But he knew. I mean, you telling Sherman, "No, I've been here before. I got to protect my flank. I know what I'm doing." Yep. And Sherman probably thought he was a little overcautious. But if you're Howard, that's the right call, and it worked out well. And Howard doesn't get the credit for Ezra Church that he should.
No, Ezra Church. The thing about Ezra Church is, kind of the Howard detractors say, "Oh, well, he was going up against SD Lee, who wasn't that great," or it was like anybody who was there could have won against that, but if you look at the accounts of that battle and how there was one point where, I don't know, someone worked out how many bullets per minute were being fired, and it was crazy. Blackjack's men experienced the worst of it, I think, at that battle, but it was still.
I'm sure SD Lee claimed victory anyway from the battle.
Tupelo
2.0. Forget it. I won. We got our asses kicked, but I won.
Didn't he go to the media and say, "I won that battle"?
Yeah, he did. He reported he won. That's kind of like saying the Eagles won the Super Bowl. No, we won. Yeah. We did. And then he reported, "Well,
I won that battle."
Yeah, it's just. But that's how he was. It definitely was. But it definitely is. Anyway, he's probably getting ready to shut down. It's almost 12. Time flies when you're talking about old SD Lee, huh?
Yeah, God, SD Lee.
We didn't even talk much Gettysburg today. Good for us. We focused on other things today.
I mean, we are all Civil War, both sides.
It definitely is.
We've been accused of being too Southern and too Northern. Which, I'm like, what?
Well, it's funny when Gary mentioned that last weekend that he gets the same shit.
Well, he mentioned it on his live stream that he did. And you and I were talking to him, and I said, I'm like, we've been accused of that too. We're too Southern or we're too Northern. We were accused of being too Northern right after we dropped the episode about Barksdale. Well,
if you're gonna do talk about the North and the South, the people on the other side, you're gonna think you're being too favoritism towards that. It's just the nature of the beast. I like to think we're neutral personally, because I've always said there are two sides or two teams on the field here. You got to talk about both.
And there's dark parts to both.
And you got to point out the flaws on both, and you can't be a fanboy or a fangirl. You got to tell it the way it is. So anyway, all right. So we're jumping off. So everybody have a great weekend. Stay out of trouble, and we'll definitely have a good time. So almost noon here on the East Coast. We're going to jump off. It's freezing outside, but we got some errands to run today.
We do.
We We have some errands to run. So everyone have a great weekend. Listen to the episode if you have not. Think well of Robert Smalls. He deserves a lot more credit than he gets.
Yeah.
And hopefully they do right by him. So all right. So we will talk soon. Mary, we'll talk soon. The pleasure again, as you know, is always all yours. And we'll talk soon.
Yep. Oh, just one more comment on here. Jason says, thanks for recommending the Meet at Gettysburg book. Just finished it and loved every page. That's awesome.
Oh, that book is awesome. That book is great. So
Frank says we're too Eastern.
Frank. All right, Frank. He's
from California.
We talked about Los Angeles. We talked about Rosecrans, Frank. What are you talking about? We talked about it. We talked about
Inglewood.
We talked about Inglewood. We talked about the Valley. Come on now. No, it's pretty